Hey folks, been lurking here for a while, so I figured it's my turn to share the chaos. Alright, so this is one of those family screw ups where no matter what you do, you're always the bad guy. Let's just say, if you've ever dealt with golden child syndrome, you'll probably relate. So yeah, buckle up, this one's a wild ride. Growing up, it was pretty obvious my family had a favorite. My older brother Jack, 2 years older than me, could do whatever the hell he wanted, and nobody blinked an eye. Me, different story. Our parents owned a small hardware store in town. They had us working there as soon as we could carry a toolbox. Fair enough, I guess. But it didn't take long to see how things really worked. Jack got the easy stuff, ringing people up at the register, chatting with customers, or hanging out in the back pretending to do paperwork. Meanwhile, I was the one unloading trucks, hauling heavy boxes, and stacking shelves till my arms ached. If something broke, somehow, that was my fault. If money went missing from the register, yeah, guess who got blamed? The guy had a habit of skipping shifts without consequences. He's got a lot going on, my parents would say. But if I showed up 5 minutes late, you need to take this job seriously. Classic double standard. After a while, I stopped expecting things to be fair. Outside of work, Jack wasn't much better. He treated my stuff like his personal stash. I'd walk outside to see my car gone, only for him to show up hours later with the tank on empty. If I called him out, he'd just laugh it off. Relax, it's not a big deal. And my parents? He's your brother. Don't be so selfish. Every damn time. It wasn't just small stuff either. One time, I saved up for a brand new power drill. Top of the line. Next thing I know, Jack's borrowed it for some side job and it comes back busted. Told him to replace it, but he just shrugged. It still works, doesn't it? Parents backed him up. It was an accident. Don't make a big deal out of it. After that, I started locking my tools in my truck, just to keep him from getting his hands on them. The worst part was how they acted like Jack could do no wrong. If he screwed up, there was always some excuse. Forgot to lock up the store one night. He must have been tired. Short on cash from the till? Maybe the register was off. Meanwhile, if I so much as looked at the clock during a slow shift, it was, you need to stay focused. Somewhere along the line, Jack's screw-ups started getting worse. He got into gambling, sports bets, poker nights, and God knows what else. Didn't take long before he started dipping into the hardware store cash to cover his losses. I found out when I noticed the till coming up short more often than usual. Tried to mention it to Dad once, thinking maybe it was a mistake, but he just waved it off. Jack's going through a rough patch, don't make a big deal out of it. Rough patch or not, the missing cash kept adding up. Meanwhile, I had to cover the difference more than once, taking it out of my own paycheck just to avoid another lecture about responsibility. Jack, of course, never got so much as a slap on the wrist. Mom just kept saying, he's under a lot of stress. He needs our support. Guess support included turning a blind eye while he treated the register like his personal ATM. Things boiled over one night after we closed the store. Jack dipped early again, leaving me to unload a shipment by myself. It wasn't just a few boxes either. Pallets of lumber, bags of cement mix, and enough hardware to stock the shelves for a month. By the time I locked up, my back felt shot. I drove home and found Jack in the garage, digging through Dad's toolbox drawers, the ones where he sometimes stashed extra cash. I didn't need to guess what he was looking for. Jack had a habit of borrowing money when his gambling debts started piling up. Looking for tools or cash this time, I said. He didn't even look up. Mind your business. Yeah, register's been short all week. You think no one noticed? I'll pay it back, like last time. I stepped closer. How much this time? Poker, football bets? He stepped in too, like he wanted to square up. At least I'm not busting my ass hauling boxes for minimum wage. Maybe if you took a few risks, you wouldn't be stuck scraping by. Before I could think, I shoved him, and we clashed. We scuffled, knocking over a stack of paint cans, and making enough noise to bring Mom and Dad running. They burst into the garage just as I shoved Jack against the wall. Mom yelled for us to stop, and Dad stepped between us, looking straight at me like I was the one who'd screwed up. I tried to explain about the missing money, but Dad cut me off. I don't want to hear it. Jack's under a lot of stress. You need to stop making things harder for him. Same excuse as always. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. After that night, I knew I needed to get out of that house. I kept my head down, worked my shifts, and tried to save up enough cash to get my own place. I wasn't looking for handouts. I just wanted out. But of course, things didn't go the way I planned. Around that time, my grandparents started having health problems. Grandpa's arthritis made it tough for him to get around, and Grandma needed medication that wasn't cheap. They'd always been good to me, never pick sides like my parents did. To help cover expenses, they'd stashed about $10,000 in a safe at their house. Not exactly the smartest move, but they didn't trust banks after getting burned during some financial mess years back. Jack started visiting them more often, playing the caring grandson routine. I figured he was just buttering them up. He had a habit of using people when he needed something. Meanwhile, I barely had time to visit between shifts at the store and side jobs I picked up to boost my savings. Then, one weekend, the money vanished. No break-ins, no forced entry, just gone. The whole family went into panic mode. Grandpa was tearing the house apart, convinced the safe had to be somewhere else. Grandma could barely speak. Everyone started tossing around theories, but it didn't take long before fingers started pointing. I was unloading a shipment at the store when my phone buzzed. "Dad, get to the house, now!" No explanation, just hung up. By the time I got there, the living room felt like an interrogation room. My parents sat on the couch, Grandma and Grandpa next to them. And then there was Jack, arms crossed, like he already knew how this was going to play out. Dad didn't waste time. $10,000 is missing. Your grandparents need that money for their medical bills. Tell us what happened. I don't know what to tell you, I said. I didn't take anything. Mom shot me a look like I just spit on the carpet. Jack said he saw you near the safe last time you visited, she said. You've been struggling with rent lately. Maybe you got desperate. Just tell the truth so we can move on. I glanced at Jack. He just stood there with that same blank expression he always had when he knew he was about to get away with something. I wouldn't steal from Grandma and Grandpa, I said, and I don't even visit that often. Dad didn't believe a word of it. Then prove it. Pay the money back. Until you do, don't bother coming around. They couldn't be serious. How was I supposed to prove something I didn't even do? They really believed I'd do such a thing without even having any evidence? I don't have 10 grand lying around, I said. Then figure it out, Dad shot back. My grandparents were silent. Nobody said a word. I waited, hoping someone would step up. But the silence just dragged on until Dad nodded toward the door. Go pack your stuff. I stood there for a second, half expecting someone to stop me. Nobody did. I turned and walked out to my car. By the time I got home, they'd already tossed my stuff into the trunk, bags of clothes, a few tools, and whatever else they thought was mine. Jack showed up just as I was about to drive off. He stood on the porch, watching, like he was waiting to see me crack. For a second, I thought about calling him out, telling everyone what kind of guy he really was. But what was the point? They'd already made up their minds. Jack pointed fingers at me. Everyone believed him. That was enough for me to understand. There's no place for me here anymore. I drove off without looking back. The next few weeks were rough. Getting kicked out wasn't some dramatic, life-changing moment. It was more like getting shoved into a pit and realizing no one was coming to pull you out. The apartment I moved into wasn't much. Bare walls, secondhand furniture, and a fridge that sounded like it was on its last legs. Rent ate up most of my paycheck from the construction job I'd picked up after leaving the store. I didn't have much left after bills, so dinner was usually instant noodles or whatever was on sale at the grocery store. The hardest part wasn't the work, though, it was the silence. My parents didn't just cut me off, they made sure everyone else did too. Calls went straight to voicemail, texts got ignored, and the invites to family gatherings stopped coming. Even friends I'd known for years started pulling away, like they didn't want to get caught in the middle. I stopped reaching out after a while, figured if they didn't want me around, I wasn't going to beg for their attention. If they thought I couldn't make it without them, they were about to find out how wrong they were. I picked up extra shifts wherever I could, fixing decks, patching roofs, remodeling kitchens. The more jobs I took, the more I learned. Carpentry, plumbing, electrical work. I soaked up every bit of knowledge I could get my hands on. YouTube tutorials, construction manuals, watching the older guys on site, whatever it took. The pay wasn't great, but it kept me moving. Every busted knuckle and sleepless night felt like a step toward a debt I owed myself, and I was determined to pay it off. Nights were the worst. After working all day, I'd come home too tired to do much besides collapse on the couch. I kept grinding. Every extra shift, every side gig, every dollar saved. It all added up, little by little. Jeremy, my cousin, was the only one from the family who stuck around. He never bought the whole thief story, probably because he knew what kind of guy Jack really was. Jeremy worked construction too, so he helped me land a few bigger jobs when I needed an extra set of hands. On weekends, he was the first one to show up. Having someone in my corner helped, but I wasn't leaning on anyone. Every dollar I made went straight back into upgrading my tools and truck. No flashy spending, no wasted cash. It wasn't long before I had to make a choice: stick with my construction crew job or go all in on my own thing. I walked into the site office, handed in my notice, and drove home, knowing there was no backup plan. No steady paycheck. Just me and whatever jobs I could land. But that was the point. No safety net, no excuses. Going solo wasn't easy. Roofing in the summer heat, crawling under houses to fix busted pipes, hauling drywall until my shoulders ached, none of it was fun. But I didn't care. Every job meant more cash, more skills, more clients spreading my name around town. There was this one job that stuck with me, the one that really got things rolling. A guy hired me to build a custom deck on his lake house. The job had to be perfect. No shortcuts, no mistakes. I spent 2 weeks measuring, cutting, and building, working late into the evening with only a flashlight when the sun went down. By the time I finished, my hands were raw and I was running on fumes. But the guy was impressed enough to start recommending me to his clients. Turns out he was a real estate investor with properties all over the county. Suddenly, I wasn't just fixing decks. I was remodeling rental properties, flipping houses, and handling renovation contracts that paid more in a month than I used to make in 3. Real estate investors started calling, and that's when things really took off. With more jobs coming in, I needed help. Hired a couple of guys I trusted, no slackers, no complainers. We tackled everything from bathroom remodels to full-scale renovations. I made sure we did every job right the first time. No cutting corners, no rushing to finish early. Reputation mattered more than price, and I wasn't about to screw that up. The money started rolling in faster than I could spend it. First thing I did was upgrade my truck. Nothing flashy, just a solid workhorse with enough space for tools and materials. Bought better equipment too. Table saws, power drills, everything I needed to handle bigger jobs. I even picked up a trailer to haul lumber and debris, saving me time and money on every job. Every dollar that didn't go into tools or gas went straight into savings. No fancy dinners, no vacations. Just slow, steady progress. I was too busy working to spend money anyway. 7 days a week, sun up to sundown, I was either on a job site or lining up the next gig. Didn't have much of a social life, but that wasn't my priority. Meanwhile, Jack was still circling the drain. His gambling problem wasn't a secret anymore. Word around town was that he owed money to half the guys he used to hang out with. A few of them even showed up at the store looking for him. But my parents covered for him, same as always, convinced he'd get back on track any day now. Didn't bother me. I had bigger things to worry about. A year in, I had more work than I could handle. Started turning down smaller jobs just to keep up with the bigger ones. Home remodels, commercial renovations, even a few custom builds. The kind of work that paid enough to keep my crews busy for weeks at a time. I bought a second truck, hired more guys, and expanded my crew to 3 teams. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. 3 crews, running jobs across the state, pulling 6 figures a year, and living in a house I owned outright. All built from nothing. No handouts, no shortcuts. Success didn't happen overnight, but in a couple of years, I wasn't just remodeling houses. I was handling multi-unit properties, office buildings, and retail spaces. But it didn't mean I forgot where I came from. Every time I drove past my parents' store, I remembered the nights I spent unloading trucks while Jack sat in the back pretending to do paperwork. I remembered the look on his face when I drove away that day, the smirk, the satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten away with it. And every time I thought about slowing down, I remembered that moment and pushed even harder. With the money rolling in, I expanded fast, bought more trucks, hired more guys, carpenters, electricians, plumbers. I kept my crews lean, no slackers, no dead weight. If a guy couldn't pull his weight or started showing up late, he was gone. Simple as that. I didn't have time to babysit anyone. Every job had to be done right the first time. My cousin Jeremy stayed in the picture, helping with networking and landing clients. The guy knew everyone, property managers, real estate developers, even a few city officials. Thanks to him, I scored a contract with a developer building luxury condos downtown. That one job alone pulled in more money than my entire first year of side gigs. After a few years of running my own business, I didn't think much about my family anymore. My days were packed with renovation projects, managing crews, and chasing deadlines. I barely had time to sleep, let alone dwell on what happened. But every now and then, Jeremy would fill me in. Turns out Jack had tried to start his own handyman business at one point, probably figured if I could do it, so could he. But surprise, surprise, it didn't last long. Poor management, missed deadlines, and a reputation for cutting corners killed any chance he had. Clients started leaving bad reviews. Word spread, and soon nobody wanted to hire him. The funny thing was, I didn't feel much of anything about it. No satisfaction, no sense of justice, just indifference. I was too focused on my own life to care. But karma has a way of showing up when you least expect it. It all came to a head one summer during a family get-together. I wasn't there, hadn't been invited to a family event in years. But Jeremy filled me in later. Apparently, Jack showed up already looking rough. He was nursing the kind of stress that comes from owing money to people who don't forget debts. But true to form, he couldn't keep his mouth shut. After a few too many drinks, he started bragging, talking about his big wins and how he was going to turn things around soon. And then he slipped up. Maybe he thought no one would catch it, or maybe he was just too far gone to care. But somewhere in the middle of his rambling, he let it slip that he'd borrowed the money from Grandpa's safe to cover a gambling debt. Thought he'd win big and put it back before anyone noticed. Only the winning part never happened. Grandpa didn't yell or make a scene. He just stood up, looked Jack square in the eye, and told him to leave. No more handouts, no more second chances. Grandma didn't say anything. She just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, looking like she'd already known the truth all along. Jack tried to talk his way out of it, said he'd pay them back once he got back on his feet. Nobody bought it. My parents, true to form, tried to smooth things over. He's going through a rough patch, they said. He's just drunk and babbling random stuff. But Grandpa wasn't having it. Don't make excuses for him, he said. He stole from us and threw it on his sister. That's the kind of person he is. That was the end of it. Jack left, slamming the door behind him. Nobody followed. When Jeremy called to tell me, I didn't say much. Just let the news settle in. I wasn't surprised. I'd suspected Jack from the start. But hearing the truth out loud still hit differently. Not because it changed anything. My family had already made their choice years ago. But there was a part of me that felt satisfied. I asked Jeremy how the rest of the family reacted. Turns out most of them just wanted to move on. Nobody talked about how they'd all stood by while I got kicked out. Nobody brought up the fact that they'd cut me off without a second thought. It was like they all just wanted to pretend none of it had ever happened. The only one who seemed to care was Grandpa. A few days after the blow-up, he called me, for the first time in years. I almost didn't pick up. Thought maybe he wanted to smooth things over like nothing had happened. He didn't say much, just asked how I was doing, if business was going well. I could hear the strain in his voice, like he wasn't sure what to say. Finally, after a long pause, he said, I should have spoken up that day. I knew you didn't take that money, but I guess I didn't know how to go against the rest of the family. I didn't say much in response, just told him I was doing fine. Maybe if he'd called years earlier, things would have been different. But by then, I'd already built a life without them. I didn't need their apologies. After that, I didn't hear from him again. Jeremy told me later that Grandpa stopped coming to family gatherings as often. Guess the whole thing hit him harder than anyone realized. As for Jack, things didn't get any better. Last I heard, he was still bouncing between jobs, trying to scrape together enough to keep the lights on. Nobody wanted to hire a guy with a reputation for stealing from his own family. Even the people he used to gamble with had stopped loaning him money. Word gets around fast in a small town. My parents kept their distance too. Whether it was guilt or pride, I didn't know, but they never reached out. Not until the day they needed something from me. A few months after the big news at the family gathering, life had settled into a rhythm. Business was still booming. Between managing contracts, overseeing job sites, and keeping up with payroll, there wasn't much time for anything else. Not that I minded. The grind was the only thing that kept me grounded. Then one evening, my phone buzzed while I was going over invoices at my kitchen table. I froze. It was my dad. I hadn't heard from him in years. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Hey, it's been a while, he said. He sounded like he wasn't sure how to start. Yeah, it has. What's up? I kept my tone flat. No point in pretending this was a social call. After a few minutes of him pretending to care, asking how I'd been, saying they missed me, apologizing vaguely for how things had gone down, he finally got to the real reason for the call. Well, the stores hit a rough patch. Some unexpected expenses came up and we're having trouble keeping up with the bills. I heard you've been doing well. Thought maybe you could help out. Maybe invest a little to keep things running. The audacity had me staring at the phone for a moment. The same man who kicked me out without proof was now asking for my money. Part of me wanted to laugh and hang up without another word. But instead, I just said, "I'll think about it," and ended the call. That's when a brilliant idea came to me. So I called them 1 week later, and we agreed to meet up. We met at a diner near the old neighborhood. Mom and Dad sat across from me, looking worn down. No apologies, no acknowledgement of the past, just awkward small talk, until Dad finally got to the point. "The bank's calling in our loans," he said. "If we can't come up with the money, we'll lose the store. We need an investor, someone we can trust." I let the silence stretch out just long enough to make them squirm. Then I laid out my terms. I'd pay off the debts, but I wanted 51% ownership, majority control, full authority to hire, fire, and make any decisions I saw fit, no exceptions. They were stunned at first, of course. They expected me to help under no conditions, just throw my money at them out of some lingering sense of loyalty. They wanted to argue, but I cut them off before they could start. "Take it or leave it. That's the only way I'll help you. But if you leave it, the store is done for." For a moment, neither of them said anything. I could see the struggle in their eyes, their pride clashing with the reality of their situation. But pride doesn't pay the bills. After a long pause, Dad finally nodded. "All right," he said. They signed the papers right there in the diner. Just like that, I became the owner of the business they once kicked me out of. Taking control of the store didn't feel like some big victory at first. It was just another job, another challenge to tackle. But as the weeks went by, the reality of it started to sink in. I wasn't just running the place, I owned it. The same building where I used to haul boxes and mop floors was now mine. Every decision, every paycheck, every dollar of profit, it all came through me first. First thing I did was go through the books. The place was a mess. Missed payments, bad inventory orders, and deals that should have never been signed. I spent the next week tearing through every account, cutting unnecessary expenses and locking down the budget. No more freebies for family, no more favors that cut into profits. Then I moved to cleaning house. Jack had to go first. But there were still a few employees who'd gotten too comfortable, slacking off, clocking in late, taking long breaks, acting like they were doing me a favor just by showing up. I gave them a week to shape up. Most of them didn't, so they were gone. No warnings, no second chances. I needed people who understood that this wasn't the same store it used to be. Once the staffing issues were sorted, I turned my focus to the finances. The books were worse than I expected. Overdue bills, bad supplier contracts, and enough wasted inventory to fill a warehouse. I spent hours going through every account, cutting waste, renegotiating terms. Some suppliers tried to push back, thinking they could take advantage of the new owner. I made it clear those days were over. Either they gave me better terms, or I'd take my business elsewhere. Most of them caved. The ones who didn't, replaced. With the finances under control, I tackled the inventory. Half the shelves were stocked with items nobody bought, cheap tools, outdated equipment, and random hardware collecting dust for years. I cleared it all out, slashed prices to move the dead stock, and used the cash to bring in products customers actually wanted. I added new lines of power tools, high-quality building materials, and specialty items that contractors couldn't get anywhere else in town. As for Jack, it was time to give him what he deserved. He was the first to go. I didn't waste time, walked into his office Monday morning and dropped the termination letter on his desk. "Here's your last paycheck," I said. "You're done here." "You can't do this," he shouted, rising to his feet. I cut him off. "Yes, I can, and I just did." Security walked him out while the staff watched. Nobody defended him. Nobody even looked surprised. With Jack gone, I turned my focus back to the business. Sales picked up almost immediately. Contractors started coming in more often. They knew we had what they needed. Homeowners appreciated the better selection, the cleaner store. I made sure the place looked professional. Organized shelves, clear signage, and a checkout process that didn't take half an hour. I even invested in a new point-of-sale system to speed things up and keep better track of inventory. Within 6 months, the store was back in the black. Sales were up, expenses were down, profits were up by nearly 20%. By the end of the year, the store was pulling in more revenue than it had in the last 5 years combined. Suppliers started offering me better deals. Local contractors began recommending us to their crews. Word spread fast that the store was under new management, and that this time, things were done right. And my parents? They stayed on as employees. No special treatment, no extra perks. They clocked in and out like everyone else. If they didn't like it, they knew where the door was. I made it clear from day one, this wasn't a family favor. This was a business. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger or resentment, just a sense of closure. I'd built my success without them. And now, every time they walked into that store, they knew exactly who they answered to. Meanwhile, Jack's downward spiral didn't slow down. No job, no money, and no more handouts from mom and dad. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a warehouse across town, barely scraping by. Nobody wanted to hire a guy with his reputation. Not after the gambling debts, missed shifts, and burned bridges. Even the people he used to hang out with had stopped returning his calls. He'd used up all his favors, and then some. Well, couldn't say I felt bad. Mom and Dad never said much about him, but I could tell it weighed on them. They never asked me to help Jack, though, not after everything that had happened. Maybe they knew better. Didn't matter. Jack had made his choices, and now he was living with the consequences. I wasn't about to waste my time trying to save someone who once tried to ruin my life. As for the rest of the family, most of them kept their distance. A few relatives started showing up at the store again once they heard I was running it, but the conversations were always short and awkward. Nobody brought up what had happened with the money, and nobody apologized for turning their backs on me. It was like they all wanted to pretend it had never happened. Fine by me. I wasn't interested in rehashing the past. But Grandpa was different. He stopped by one afternoon, unannounced. I was in the middle of unloading a shipment when I saw him standing near the entrance. For a second, I thought about pretending I hadn't seen him, but he came over. He stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Place looks good," he said. "Thanks," I replied. Then he continued. "I should have spoken up that day. I knew you didn't take that money, but, well, I think I didn't have the courage to stand against the crowd." I just nodded. "Save it, I'm doing good." And I meant it. Maybe if he'd said those words years ago, things would have been different. But standing there, surrounded by the business I'd built with my own two hands, I realized I didn't need his apology. I'd already proven everything I needed to prove. After a few more minutes of small talk, he left. I never saw him again after that. Jeremy told me later that Grandpa had stopped going to family gatherings and kept to himself for the most part. Maybe the guilt was too much, or maybe he just got tired of the drama. Either way, I didn't care. By the time the next year rolled around, the store was running like a well-oiled machine. Profits were steady, and the customers knew they could count on us. I kept building my construction business, running 3 solid crews while managing the store on the side. These days, I don't think much about the past. Life's better than ever, built on my own terms. And that feels so damn good. Edit. Wow, didn't expect this to blow up. Thanks for reading and for all the comments. Appreciate the support. To those asking, no, I haven't heard from Jack in a while. Last I heard, he's still bouncing between jobs. As for my parents, they've learned to keep things professional at the store. We're civil, but that's about it. Life's good, and I'm just focused on what's next. Thanks again, y'all.